That soft tap of her beak against your skin isn't a tiny act of aggression. It might be the closest thing to affection a chicken can give you. And here's the part that throws most keepers off. She uses that exact same gentle motion to mean 4 or 5 completely different things. There's an entire language hiding inside something most backyard keepers write off as random pecking. One that shifts meaning depending on force, location, and what happens in the seconds right after. If you've been treating every peck the same way, wait until you see how differently a request, a boundary test, and a genuine sign of affection are actually supposed to look and feel. So what is she really saying when she gives you that soft little tap? How do you tell the difference between her asking for something and her testing where she stands with you? And what does it actually mean when that gentle peck suddenly stops feeling gentle at all? When your chicken gives you those gentle pecks, do you actually know what she's trying to say? Yes, it can catch you off guard the first time, but behind that soft tap of her beak against your skin, there's something most backyard keepers completely misread. It's one of the most versatile communication tools a chicken has, and the same motion can mean 5 or 6 entirely different things depending on how she delivers it. And if you've been treating every peck as a tiny act of aggression, which most people do, you've been missing what she was actually trying to tell you. Let's start with what that gentle peck really is. 1. It was never just pecking for the sake of pecking. Most people assume it's simple. Chickens peck. That's what their beak is for. But here's the thing. A chicken's beak is one of the most sensitive and precisely controlled body parts she has. It's packed with mechanoreceptors, specialized nerve endings that allow her to distinguish texture, pressure, and detail with remarkable accuracy. If pecking were just an undifferentiated reflex, every peck would land with the same force and the same intent. They don't. A peck aimed at investigating a strange object on the ground looks and feels completely different from a peck aimed at you during a calm, settled moment. Because the beak functions as her primary tool for exploring the world, the way a hand functions for a human. She uses it to test, to taste, to communicate, to groom, and to assert. A gentle peck directed at you specifically, delivered without the force of a genuine strike, is her using that primary tool in its investigative or communicative mode, not its defensive one. Research in poultry sensory biology has confirmed that the chicken beak tip contains a dense concentration of touch receptors, comparable in sensitivity to the human fingertip, allowing for fine discrimination during exploratory pecking. When your hen gently pecks you, her beak is doing something closer to careful touching than striking. The softness is the message, not an accident. And by the way, if that gentle peck ever shifts into something sharper, faster, or paired with a different posture, that's a different signal entirely. We'll cover exactly how to tell the difference before the end. 2. The exploratory peck is information gathering. Have you noticed her gently pecking at your shoelaces, a button, a piece of jewelry, or a loose thread on your clothing? That's not random mischief, it's active investigation. Here's what most people don't realize. Chickens evolved as opportunistic foragers, constantly sampling their environment to determine what's edible, what's interesting, and what's worth further attention. A new object in her environment, including something on your body that wasn't there before or that catches the light differently, triggers an investigative response. The gentle peck is her testing it, gathering tactile and sometimes taste information the same way she would with a new seed or insect she's encountered for the first time. Studies in poultry foraging behavior describe this as exploratory pecking, distinct from feeding pecks in both force and follow-through. Exploratory pecks tend to be lighter, more tentative, and often repeated several times on the same object as she processes what she's found. When your hen does this to something on you specifically, she's including you, or at least the interesting object attached to you, in her normal foraging assessment of the world. It's curiosity expressed through her primary sensory tool. 3. The affiliative peck is closer to grooming than you'd think. Does your hen sometimes gently peck or nibble at your hair, your skin, or your clothing in a way that feels almost rhythmic or repetitive, especially when she's settled calmly near you? That motion has a specific name in behavioral research, and it points towards something social rather than investigative. Chickens engage in a behavior called allopreening in their interactions with other flock members, a form of social grooming where one bird gently works through another's feathers with careful, repeated movements. This behavior is reserved for individuals within a hen's trusted social circle and serves to reinforce social bonds within the flock. Research into social bonding behaviors in domestic fowl has documented that hens with strong attachments to specific flock members engage in measurably more allopreening-type behavior with those individuals compared to less familiar birds. When your hen directs that same gentle, repetitive pecking and nibbling motion toward you, particularly toward your hair or skin in a calm, unhurried way, she may be extending a version of that same social grooming behavior toward you, treating you as a member of her trusted circle worth that kind of careful attention. That motion isn't an attempt to hurt you in miniature. It's closer to the chicken equivalent of a gentle, affectionate gesture reserved for individuals she's bonded with. And if this is changing how you think about those quiet moments she spends close to you, hit that like and subscribe. It helps us reach more keepers who want to understand what their flock is actually expressing. 4. The attention-getting peck is a request. Have you noticed her give you a quick light peck on your hand or leg, then step back and look at you expectantly? That sequence, peck followed by a pause and direct gaze, functions very differently from either exploration or grooming. In flock social dynamics, lower-ranking or younger birds sometimes use a light peck directed at another individual as a way of requesting something. Attention, access to a space, or simply acknowledgement. It's a low-intensity version of the kind of contact-initiating behavior researchers have documented across various social species, where a brief physical touch precedes and prompts a desired response from the recipient. When your hen does this and then waits, watching you, she's likely using the same toolkit. She's not delivering a complaint, she's making a request, possibly for food, possibly for you to move so she can access something, possibly simply for your attention in that moment. The waiting and watching afterward is the tale. A peck with no follow-up interest in your response is more likely incidental. A peck followed by clear attention to what you do next is communicative. 5. The dominance testing peck looks and feels different. What about a peck that's firmer, faster, and not accompanied by any of the calm body language described above? This is where it's worth distinguishing gentle communication from something with a different function entirely. Chickens maintain their social structure partly through pecking, which is after all where the term pecking order originates. A firmer, more deliberate peck, especially one directed at your hand when you're near food, near the coop, or in a context resembling a resource interaction, may be your hen testing boundaries the same way she would with a flock member she's uncertain how to rank relative to herself. Poultry behavior research describes this as agonistic pecking, a category distinct from the gentle exploratory or affiliative pecks described earlier, characterized by greater force, a more direct trajectory, and typically a brief, tense pause beforehand, rather than the more fluid, casual movement of an exploratory peck. This type of peck isn't aggression in the way a person might assume. It's social testing. The same low-stakes, boundary-probing chickens direct at each other constantly as they maintain their hierarchy. It happens to land on you because socially, she's including you in that same hierarchy. This is also why consistent, calm, non-reactive responses to this type of peck over time tend to reduce its frequency. You're not punishing her. You're simply demonstrating, through repetition, that the boundary test doesn't produce the social shift she might have been probing for. 6. Where on your body she pecks changes the meaning. Does the location of her gentle peck seem to follow a pattern? Hands more often than face, shoes more often than legs? Location carries information too. Pecks directed at hands often relate to food association, since hands are where treats typically come from, and chickens are highly capable of forming strong associative links between specific body parts and specific outcomes through repeated experience. Pecks directed at hair or exposed skin during calm, settled moments lean more toward the affiliative, grooming adjacent category described earlier, since these are areas a hen might naturally direct social grooming behavior toward another flock member. Pecks at shoes, jewelry, or small decorative objects tend to fall into the exploratory category, driven by visual interest in something novel or reflective, rather than any social or food-related motivation. Reading where the peck lands, alongside how it lands, gives you a much more reliable picture than trying to interpret the peck in isolation. 7. When pecking changes, the change itself is the message. So what does it mean when a hen who has always pecked gently suddenly starts pecking harder, more frequently, or in a way that feels different from her established pattern? This is what I mentioned at the beginning, and it's the distinction that matters most for anyone who spends regular time with their flock. A consistent escalation in pecking intensity, frequency, or context is rarely something to dismiss as a mood swing. Sometimes it reflects a genuine shift in flock hierarchy that's spilling over into how she interacts with you. Sometimes it reflects frustration around a specific identifiable trigger, a change in feeding routine, a new restriction on her space, or competition with another bird that's increased her overall stress and lowered her tolerance generally. Occasionally, a sudden shift toward harder, more persistent pecking can also accompany underlying discomfort or pain, particularly if it's paired with other behavioral changes like reduced appetite, withdrawal from the flock, or changes in her usual routine. Pecking that's genuinely out of character for that specific hen is worth viewing as part of a broader pattern rather than an isolated incident. The same way any other behavioral shift deserves context rather than a snap judgment. Most of the time, though, that gentle peck you feel is exactly what it looks like: curiosity, a quiet form of affection, a small, low-stakes request, a piece of the same communication system she uses with every member of her flock, extended to include you because, in her world, you already are one. The next time she gives you that soft tap of her beak, you'll know it was never about being mean. It was her talking, in the only language she has.